The lights were bright, the crowd was massive, the riddim shook the ground. Then, silence. One song, one moment, one chance to live forever. You think you know every great reggae act of your time? You don't. Some shined like the sun for a single tune, then the world moved on. From Kingston to London, from the dance halls to the radio waves, they had it all in their hands. Tonight, we count down 10 reggae acts that touched the top and faded like smoke in the wind. The music still plays, the voices still call out, but the men behind them, gone. Stay with us, because by the time we reach number 1, you'll understand why some legends never get the credit they deserve. Number 10. Carl Douglas Kung Fu Fighting.
Everybody was kung fu fighting.
Take yourself back to 1974. The dance halls were packed. The radio was playing it everywhere. That groove, that voice, that hook that lived in your head for weeks. You couldn't escape it, and you didn't want to.
Kids were fast as lightning. In fact,
Now, I know some folks call this a disco song, but listen close. That reggae-flavored groove is right there, that offbeat, that bounce. The man behind it was Jamaican-born. He carried that island sound into the studio.
it was a little bit frightening, but they fought with.
The song was produced by Bidoo, an Indian producer working in London. It came out on Pi Records. It was recorded at Pi Studios in London. The lyrics? Pure fun. About kung fu fighters in a Chinese restaurant.
Expert timing. There were
Silly on the surface, but the groove was deep. The song hit number 1 on the Billboard Hot 100 in America. Number 1 in the UK, too. It sold 11 million copies worldwide. 11 million.
funky Chinamen from funky Chinatown. They were chopping.
Here's something most folks don't know. The song was recorded in 10 minutes. 10. It was meant to be a B-side. Just filler for the back of the record. The producer flipped it at the last minute. Good thing he did.
They were chopping them down. It's an ancient
So why did the man fade? He had a few more songs. None of them hit like that one. The disco wave moved on. The roots reggae movement got serious. There was no room for fun party songs anymore.
Chinese art, and everybody knew their part. From a fainting to
He kept performing. He played small shows. But the world stopped paying attention. One song, 11 million copies, and almost no name recognition today. That's the price of one perfect moment.
a slip and a kicking from the hip. Everybody was kung fu fighting.
You think you know who's coming up next? Trust me, you don't. Number 9. Althea and Donna, Uptown Top Ranking. Want to hear this one?
All right, C-Trends fam, let's keep it real. We're pouring our hearts into bringing you the best celebrity news and music deep dives. What? Check it. A massive 98% of you aren't subscribed yet. Subscribing is how you can truly support us, helping us grow and create even better content. If you're vibing with what we do, take a sec to hit that subscribe button. It's free and makes a huge difference. Plus, ring that notification bell so you never miss out. Let's flip that 98% and build this C-Trends family together. Your support is everything.
Every story you see here takes hours of digging, piecing together history, and bringing forgotten moments back to life. If you'd like to support that work, you can become a channel member. It's just the cost of a cup of coffee, but it helps us keep these stories alive, and for that, we're grateful. Number 8. Dave and Ansel Collins, Double Barrel. The early days of reggae crossing over to the world, before Bob Marley was a global name, before the world knew the power of the island sound. 2 men, 1 song, 1 earthquake of a hit. The The track had a hard, driving rhythm. That keyboard hook was unforgettable. The voice on top was wild, loud, almost shouting. It sounded like nothing else on the radio at the time. It was raw. It was powerful. It was new.
Work it on, baby.
The song was produced by Winston Riley. It was recorded at Dynamic Sound Studio in Kingston. It came out on Techniques Records in Jamaica. In the UK, it was released on Trojan-related labels. The rhythm was tight. The keyboard playing came from Sly Dunbar's early work with the rhythm section. The vocals were almost a kind of toasting, an early form of what would later become rap and dancehall. The song hit #1 on the UK singles chart in 1971. #1. It also charted in America. It sold over 1 million copies. Now here's something. The two men on the song, they weren't really a duo. They had never worked together before this song. The producer put them together for one session. They made a hit. And then they went their separate ways. That's why they faded.
Hit the spot.
There was no real group to promote. No tour band, no follow-up album in the traditional sense. They each had solo careers. But the magic of that one combination never happened again. The song is a foundation stone of reggae history. Producers still copy that rhythm today, but the two voices behind it, lost to time for most listeners. A lightning strike, beautiful, brief, gone.
Yeah, babe.
If you think that story was something, the next one will give you chills. #7. Nicky Thomas, Love of the Common People. You remember those soulful reggae voices from the early 70s? That voice that could break your heart in one line? That was him, a man who sang from a deep place, a place of struggle, a place of hope. The song was a cover of an American country song from the 60s, but when he sang it, he made it his own. He turned it into a reggae anthem, about poor people, about working people, about families trying to make it through hard times. Anybody who knew struggle understood every word. The song was produced by Joe Gibbs. It was released in 19 on Trojan Records in the UK. It hit #9 on the UK singles chart. That was huge for a reggae song at that time. Real huge. The song crossed over to people who had never listened to reggae before. White, working-class kids in England played it on jukeboxes. The skinhead reggae scene loved it. It became a sound system favorite for years. Funny thing, the man had a powerful voice. Some say he could have been one of the biggest reggae singers of all time. He had the soul, he had the look, he had the songs. So what happened? The reggae scene in England was changing. Roots music took over, then dub, then dancehall. His sweet, soulful style fell out of fashion. He kept recording, he kept performing. But the hits didn't come again. He passed away in 1990, far too young. His song still gets played at sound system revivals. His voice still moves people who hear it for the first time. But his name? Most folks have to look it up. That voice deserved more. Hold on, because the next story is going to take you somewhere unexpected. #6. The Pioneers' Long Shot Kicked a Bucket. Picture this. 1969. The horses are running, the crowd is packed, the dust is flying, and one horse goes down. He doesn't get up. That's the story behind one of the greatest reggae songs ever made. The song was a true story. It was about a racehorse named Longshot. He died at Caymanas Park Racetrack in Jamaica. The whole island knew about it. The group turned it into a song. A song about loss. A song about gambling. A song about life. Every man in the dance hall could relate to losing money on a bad bet. The song was produced by Leslie Kong at Beverly's Records in Kingston. The studio was Dynamic Sounds. The song came out in 1969 on Trojan Records in the UK. It hit number 21 on the UK singles chart. It became a skinhead reggae anthem. It was played at every blues dance, every house party, every sound system clash, the horns, the harmonies, the story. It had everything. Here's a story for you. The producer behind this song was a legend in his own right. He produced some of the earliest hits for Bob Marley, for Jimmy Cliff, for Desmond Decker. The man had a golden ear. But he passed away suddenly in 1971. Just 2 years after this song was a hit. He was only 38 years old. That's part of why the group faded. They lost their producer. They lost their guide. The reggae sound shifted toward roots in the 70s. The pioneers' sweet harmony style fell out of step with the new direction. They kept recording. They moved to England. But they never had another hit like that one. The song still plays at every revival night. The harmonies are still gold. But the group itself faded into the background, like a name on an old race ticket, crumpled, forgotten. If you're enjoying this, smash that like button. It really helps the channel keep going. Now let's keep moving. The next one is going to surprise you. Number 5. Boris Gardner, Elizabethan Reggae. You ever hear a song that didn't fit any rule? A song that should not have worked? But it did, and it became a hit all around the world? That's this one. An old classical melody from England from the 1600s turned into a reggae instrumental with that smooth, easy rhythm, with that gentle bounce. It sounded like sitting on a porch on a Sunday afternoon. Peaceful, sweet, strange in the best way. The song was produced by Lee Perry. Yes, that Lee Perry, the mad genius, the man behind so much of reggae's greatest moments. The song was recorded in Jamaica in 1969. It was released on Trojan Records in the UK. The track was an instrumental version of an old English tune called Elizabethan Serenade, turning a 300-year-old classical melody into a reggae song. Who else but Lee Perry would think of that? The song hit number 14 on the UK singles chart in 1970. The man behind the voice and the bass became a star overnight. Now, here's something. The man went on to have a much bigger hit years later, a song called I Wanna Wake Up With You in 1986. That one hit number 1 in the UK. But here's the thing. Most folks remember the second song. They forget that he had a hit 15 years before that one. 2 careers, 2 big songs, long time between them. So why is the first hit forgotten? Because it was an instrumental. Hard to remember the name of an instrumental act. Hard to sing along. The second song was a love ballad. It stuck in people's heads. The first song? Beautiful. Strange. A footnote. The man passed away in 2024. A long life in music. But that first hit? Most folks couldn't name it. That's the strange way memory works. The next one. Oh, the next one. Hold on tight. Number 3. Tyrone Taylor, Cottage in Negril.
And go west towards sunset at the...
You ever close your eyes and let a song take you somewhere else? To a beach, to a cottage by the sea, to a place where the worries of the world can't reach you? That's what this song does. Every single time. The voice was smooth like honey. The rhythm was gentle, like waves on a Negril beach. The whole song was a dream, a vacation in 3 minutes, a reminder that there's a place where you can rest, where you can love, where you can just be. The song came out in the early 1980s. It was produced at the Channel 1 studio in Kingston. The rhythm section behind it was tight. Real musicians, real feeling. The lyrics were about taking a woman to a quiet cottage in Negril, away from the noise of the city, away from the troubles of life. Just two people, the sea, the sun. The song became a massive sound system favorite. It was played at every blues dance in the UK for years. It got covered by other artists. It still plays on reggae stations all over the world today. Here's something. The man behind that voice came up in the music scene as a teenager. He sang background vocals for some of the biggest names in reggae before he stepped out on his own. He had patience. He waited his turn. He earned every note. So why did he fade? Dancehall took over in the 80s. The smooth lovers rock sound got pushed aside. The man kept recording. He had a few more songs, but none of them touched that one.
Bring me joy when you give. Ooh, yeah.
He passed away in 2007, far too young. His voice still echoes through the speakers at every reggae revival, but his name, whispered only by those who know. A Cottage in Negril, a dream song. A man who deserved more. We're more than halfway through. Which song has hit you hardest so far? Comment below. Tell me your story. Tell me which one took you back to a moment in your life. I want to hear it. Now let's keep going. The next one comes with a story I promised earlier. A controversy that changed everything. Number 2. Greyhound Black and White.
The ink is black, the page is white.
The world was changing. Civil rights, racial tension, wars and protests. And one reggae group put out a song that asked the world a simple question. Why can't we live together? Why can't black and white walk side by side?
Together we learn to read and write.
The song was sweet, it was hopeful, it had a gentle reggae bounce, but the message? Heavy, real heavy. About children growing up together no matter the color of their skin, about a better world, about hope in dark times.
To read and write.
The song was a cover. The original was written by an American songwriter, but the reggae version made it global. It was produced by Dave Bloxham. It came out on Trojan Records in the UK in 1971.
Child is black, child is...
It hit number 6 on the UK singles chart. It was played on radios all across Britain. It even crossed over to mainstream pop stations. White listeners, black listeners, Indian listeners.
White, the whole world looks upon the side.
Everybody heard it. Everybody felt it. Here's something. The song was popular with school choirs in the UK. Real young children would sing it at school assemblies. The message of unity was so strong that teachers used it as a teaching tool. A reggae song, taught in British schools. Imagine that. But there was trouble around the song. I told you I'd get to the controversy. Hold on, we're going there right now. Remember when I said this song had a story behind it? Here it is. The song was about racial unity, about black and white living together in peace. But the message of unity was a problem for some people. There were stations in certain countries that wouldn't play it. Some say South Africa banned it during the apartheid era.
Understand, this is the law of all.
The government there didn't want any song promoting racial unity to reach the ears of black South Africans. In interviews over the years, it's been said that the song was kept off the radio in several African countries with white minority rule. There are different versions of the story. Some say the song was banned outright. Some say it was just kept off mainstream radio. Some say it was only played on underground stations. The truth is hard to find now, but the result was the same. In countries where the song could have meant the most, it was hidden away.
The world is black, the world is white.
There was also industry tension. The label Trojan Records was struggling financially. Reggae was big, but the British music industry was unsure of how to handle it. The label put out hit after hit, but the money was not flowing back to the artists the way it should have.
It turns by day and then by night.
There were stories of artists not getting paid, of contracts that didn't make sense, of producers and labels keeping the lion's share. Greyhound was part of that struggle. They had a hit song, but the rewards didn't match the success.
It turns by night.
How did all this affect the legacy? In the short term, it pushed the song deeper into the underground. People who heard it remembered it forever. It became a cult classic.
And now at last we play.
A song shared between fans who knew its real meaning. The unity message lived on through sound systems, through revival nights, through old reggae compilation albums.
We see the alphabet of liberty.
The band itself? They had a few more singles. They had another hit called Moon River later in 1972. But the magic faded. The label issues, the industry pressure, the changing music scene. By the mid-70s, they were no longer charting. Some members went back to Jamaica. Some stayed in England. They drifted apart. That's why this song isn't just music, it's history. It's a reminder that some songs were too true, too honest, too dangerous for the world they were born into. Black and white, living side by side. Still a dream we're working toward. The song knew it back then.
All right, C-Trends fam, let's keep it real. We're pouring our hearts into bringing you the best celebrity news and music deep dives. What? Check it. A massive 98% of you aren't subscribed yet. Subscribing is how you can truly support us, helping us grow and create even better content. If you're vibing with what we do, take a sec to hit that subscribe button. It's free and makes a huge difference. Plus, ring that notification bell so you never miss out. Let's flip that 98% and build this C-Trends family together. Your support is everything.
Every story you see here takes hours of digging, piecing together history, and bringing forgotten moments back to life. If you'd like to support that work, you can become a channel member. It's just the cost of a cup of coffee, but it helps us keep these stories alive, and for that, we're grateful. Number 1. The song that started this whole story.
Isn't it strange how princesses and kings?
The song that hits like a sermon, like a wise old man sitting on a porch telling you the truth about life. The song that has lived for over 50 years and still feels brand new every time you hear it.
In clown-headed capers in sawdust.
That bass line, that guitar, those harmonies. 3 voices weaving together like a fine cloth. Each one perfect, each one needed. You hear it once, and you never forget it. The lyrics talk about life as a book with no rules, a book you write yourself, about how nobody really knows what tomorrow will bring, about finding peace in a world full of confusion. The song was produced by Harry J. It was recorded at Harry J Studios in Kingston. The rhythm section was Sly and Robbie level musicians. The harmonies were arranged by the group themselves. It came out in 1973 on Island Records. The song hit big in the UK, in the Caribbean, in Africa. It was covered later by hip-hop artists. It was sampled. It was used in films. It became one of the most quoted reggae lyrics of all time. Isn't it strange how princesses and kings, you know how it goes. Here's something most folks don't know. The lyrics were partly based on an old American poem from the 1800s by a writer named R.L. Sharp. The group took the poem, changed it, made it their own, made it reggae, made it eternal. So why are they here at number one? Because the group never got the worldwide fame they deserved. They had hits in the UK, they had hits in Jamaica, they worked with the biggest names in the business. But ask most people on the street to name the group. They can't. They know the song, they sing along. But the harmonies, the men who created them, lost to time. The group had internal struggles, lead singer changes, label problems. The reggae scene shifted to dancehall in the 80s. Their style of sweet harmony reggae was pushed aside. Two of the original members have passed away now. The group still performs in some form, but the magic of those three original voices together, it only happened on the records. That's the truth of number one. A song that should be as famous as any rock anthem, a group that should be in every music hall of fame, and yet they sit quietly in the shadows of reggae history. Their book has no rules, but the world wrote a sad chapter for them anyway. The music plays on, the voices echo, and we remember, we have to remember.